Today I'm making some bread rolls with a simple method that will explain most of the basic bread making techniques. I'll start with the basic ingredients: flour, yeast and salt. The measurements I use are all baker's percentages. That is, everything is described as a percentage of the weight of the flour you start with. I'm using 200 grams of flour, and that's enough to make 4 small rolls. It'll be a 70% hydration dough, so 70% of 200 grams is 140. Yeast will be 1%, so from 200 grams that's 2 grams of yeast, about half a teaspoon. Salt will also be 1%, so that's 2 grams again, and that's about a quarter of a teaspoon, but the amount you put is up to your taste. Just remember that more salt will slow down the yeast and too much will kill it, and it won't do you any good either. My preferred technique starts by mixing the dough in a bowl just until it picks up all the flour into a rough ball. Then turn it out onto the bench to autolyse. That is, just allow the water to soak through the dough for about 5 minutes. Then my favourite easy kneading technique is just stretch and fold from 4 sides of the ball of dough every 5 minutes for the first 30 minutes. 70% hydration dough can be pretty sticky at first, but if you wet your hands, it won't stick to your fingers during the brief knead. Cover the dough with the mixing bowl during the rest periods. You'll feel and see the dough getting smoother and more elastic with each knead. You can actually get away with only 3 kneads at 10-minute intervals, but 6 at 5 will ensure a really good texture. There's not much point in going beyond 30 minutes, because after that the bubbles from the yeast start to form and extra kneading will just burst them. At the last knead, it's a good idea to leave the dough in a simple log shape so you can divide it evenly later on. From now on, you actually want the surface of the dough to dry out a little so you can handle it easily during shaping. Cover the dough with a clean, dry tea towel and wait until it rises to about double its original size. That takes about 1 hour at 20 degrees C or 2 hours at 15. Now cut the dough into 4 even-sized pieces. I do this with a black plastic plaster knife that I bought from the hardware store for about $2.50. I sprinkle it with a little flour to stop it sticking to the dough. Static electricity holds the flour onto the plastic, and the black colour lets me see how much flour is on there. Cut away the first piece and lift it onto your hand with the plaster knife. Stretch the dough lengthways and lay it on the bench with the sticky cut side up. Then roll it up, keeping an even tension on the outside skin. This lays the foundation for a good oven spring. Leave the pre-shaped rolls to rest while you turn on the oven and prepare the baking tray. Heat the oven to 200 degrees C with a heavy metal baking tray or a skillet in the bottom. Lightly smear the baking tray with olive oil. Now lift the pre-shaped rolls by dragging the plaster knife across the surface of the bench. This will further tighten the outside surface, which helps to hold the shape and spring open the roll during baking. Very gently roll the pieces with a lengthwise stretching motion till they're about 15 centimeters long. Use the minimum of pressure so you don't burst any bubbles. Use just enough flour to stop the rolls sticking to the bench. Lift the rolls gently onto the baking tray, leaving about 2 centimeters between them. Now we'll make some glue to stick some seeds to the surface and give it a nice crisp, glossy crust. Put about 80 mils or 1/3 of a cup of water in a microwave jug. Add half a teaspoon of corn flour and mix it thoroughly. Set the microwave for about 40 seconds and start it while the mix is still agitated. Stop it at about 20 seconds and swirl it again. Continue cooking until you just see the mix start to boil. Then stop it and swirl to get an even mix. Now put about 200 mils of water in another microwave jug and set the microwave for 2 minutes. This water will provide steam for the first half of the bake. You can use a baker's grigneur or a single-sided razor blade to slit the upper surface of the rolls. There's a lot of black magic about the technique for this, but I've found it's much more about having just the right amount of moisture. If the surface is too wet or not tightened, it will pucker and tear while you're trying to slit it. While the water is heating, paint each roll with a little glue. Use just enough to wet the surface of the dough, and be careful to avoid getting glue in the slit, or it will reseal and it won't spring open when you put it in the oven. Sprinkle your favourite seeds over the wet surface. I'm using sesame seeds here. Now slide the baking tray into the oven. Place a dry tea towel onto the oven door to protect the glass. Now pour the heated water into the preheated oven tray in the bottom of the oven. Remove the tea towel and close the oven door. Making good bread is really all about making good foam. That means making lots of bubbles in your dough and allowing them to expand without bursting. A shot of steam helps to transfer heat to the dough quickly, so the bubbles can expand as much as possible before the dough sets. It also condenses on the surface of the dough to gelatinize starch, which will ultimately dry out to form a crispy crust. The slit along the top of the roll allows the dough to expand more even after the skin has set. If you kept good tension in the surface layer of your dough, the rolls should tear wide open and pull up a nice crispy grenier ridge along the side. Cooking time should be about 20 minutes at 200 degrees C, but just wait until you have a nice even brown colour that you like. A lower temperature with a longer bake time will give you a thicker, crispier crust. Allow the rolls to cool for about 30 minutes on a wire rack. You should be able to hear faint crackling noises of the crust singing as it cools. If you cut the rolls too early, the dough inside will tear rather than cut. So there you have it. What better way to enjoy lunch than some really fresh bread with a little pepper smoked salmon?